forget, I'm sure.
I've done that one too many times. I've even had a big red sign that says, "Don't forget to record," and I still forgot to record. Don't ask me how that happens because I don't know.
I know. It's just,
No,
I don't know,
I've done
sticky
that,
notes or
Claire.
whatever.
I'm like,
I've done that.
it's just so like, I don't know, in the moment, and then yeah, I forget.
Mhm.
So it's recording now.
Okay.
Great, great.
And we'll give it a few more minutes and let a few more people jump on, and then we'll get started.
Kathleen, how is the weather in Chicago today?
Gorgeous.
Is it really?
Yeah, beautiful. It's
It's
getting a little chillier in the morning, but really nice. Sunny. I
it-
think it's supposed to get up in the 60s, so good fall day.
it's a rainy day in Southern California.
Oh, that never happens. Come on.
It does happen.
Is it
And we
pouring?
need it, trust me.
I'm sure. We had a bunch of rain here in the Chicago area about, I think it was last week, and everything is so green. The grass is really green, like springtime green almost. Usually at this time of the year, everything's starting to kind of dry out, but
Yeah.
it's really pretty. Looks like we're having some more instructors joining us, which is great. We'll get started in maybe just a couple minutes. We'll give people a chance to sign in.
Sounds great.
And Claire, I'm not seeing any messages from anybody about having any glitchy little issues with signing in. I don't know if you're seeing any of that.
No, I don't have anything from my end yet.
Okay.
Oh, Bob did say hello. He said sorry he can't unmute.
Hi, Bob.
Right. Yep. People are starting to join.
Yeah, I see a few familiar names. Gosh, maybe people could type in the chat where they're calling in from today. It's always helpful to see how far away people are.
I know. I always love seeing where everyone's in
I think
from.
Bob's in Washington State. That's about the opposite, as far away as you can get from that, Claire, being in the Atlanta area. You're not quite in like Miami. That would be the exact opposite, but
You a Falcons fan, Claire?
Meh.
Yeah.
More, I would say more, I don't know. I'm not a huge, like, I like to watch NFL football, but I'm not a huge fan of any sorts. I feel like I'm more a fan of the Patriots because one of my best friend's husbands plays for them. But other than that, I'm like, meh, I could really care
Oh,
less.
I'm a huge Patriots fan. Grew up in Boston. Yeah,
Okay. Do you know
yeah.
David Andrews?
The center. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, he's
That's my best friend's husband.
because he went to school in Georgia, right?
He did. He went to UGA. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Good
So.
And
player.
UGA is only ranked #1 in the country right now in football. So
Whoop, whoop.
really? Wow.
yeah, and the Braves swept the Dodgers at home. So
Yeah, so those
yeah,
are two teams I could definitely get behind. The Braves and
it's a good day to be an Atlanta person, right?
it is. For once, it's normally the opposite. So we're doing good this year. Knock on wood. All right. I guess should we go ahead and get started? I'm sure we'll have a few more people to jump on, but so we can go ahead and take full advantage of this hour. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. We really appreciate y'all taking time out of your day. We know it is the midst of the fall semester and things are hectic, so we just appreciate you taking time out to hang out with us. My name is Claire Mclemore, and I am one of the marketing managers on our accounting list at McGraw Hill. We also have Kathleen Clare on the phone, who is one of our portfolio managers on our accounting list at McGraw Hill. So we'll be kind of behind the scenes today. We'll be looking at the chat, Q&A, and helping out there. And then we have two wonderful people on the phone with us that will be presenting. We have Mike Deschamps, who is a professor of accounting at Miracosta College, and he is also co-author on our Cruise Fundamentals of Taxation texts. And we also have Sean Mullen, who is the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Surgent. So we're very happy to have both of them on the phone with us today. We're excited for them to take you through the enrolled agent exam and the cruise text. And so, yeah, just a few housekeeping things before we get started. Everyone has been turned on mute. So unfortunately, you cannot come off mute, but if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to enter them in the chat and the Q&A. We just make sure that everyone's on mute just to help with some of the background noise. So if you do have any questions, please insert them. Kathleen and I will be keeping an eye on it. We'll be answering questions throughout the presentation. And we'll also be recording this session. So we'll be sending this out as a follow-up to you. So if there's anything that we cover that you want to go and look back on, feel free to. And I think that is it in terms of housekeeping. And I guess with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sean and Mike.
Thank you so much, Claire, and welcome everybody.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. So Mike and I have known each other since Mike, like 2010, 2011, somewhere in that frame. I would, if I were to explain Mike and myself to anyone, I would say we are both evangelists for the enrolled agent credential. Mike is an enrolled agent, so clearly he is. But we're both passionate about it because it is a credential that can be earned that offers a lot of earning power for the person who attains it, but doesn't require a heavy lift in terms of time or expense to get there. So we want to talk about that today, but in doing that discussion, we want to talk about how you can leverage that opportunity for your students by first giving them that fundamental understanding of taxation through the McGraw Hill Fundamentals of Taxation book, and then we're going to talk about how we partner with it, because we're starting our 4th year of our partnership now. Surgent is with McGraw Hill, where for schools who adapt the Fundamentals of Taxation book, which, as Claire pointed out, Mike is one of the co-authors, our course is offered for free with that. So Mike and I are going to kind of ham and egg our way through this, but we're going to first talk about something that it needs to be said. And so this is a slide that takes data from the Internal Revenue Service website, Office of Preparers, and you'll see that with that first red arrow, there are currently 759,000 people that have an active PTIN, and you'll see down below that there are a total of 1.7 million PTINs that have been issued. I have been going to IRS tax forms for forever. I've lost count of how many years and how many I've gone to. And in those forms, I come across more than I care to mention of individuals that are not what I call tax preparers or data entry people. And what I mean by that is that we have a large concentration of tax preparers in this country that we have no way to verify what their competency is. They're not a CPA, they're not an attorney, they're not an EA, and they're not doing the annual filing season program, the FSP. And so if you look at that delta between the 759,000 and 1.782 million, Mike, we have like 350,000 to possibly up to 1 million people that are doing taxes that we don't know what their level of expertise is. So when I do presentations to the NAEA where they bring future EAs into the conversation, I use this analogy. You go to a doctor's office and you have a receptionist that takes your information, a medical assistant that takes your blood pressure and your heart rate and temperature, and then you have the physician that does the actual diagnosis and treatment. And which one of those do you want to treat you medically? All right. Now take those same 3 people and equate that to a tax preparer. The receptionist is someone who knows nothing about taxes. They're just, they're doing the entry of the information like data entry, but they don't know what happens when you do line 14. And then you got someone who's trained, they have learned how to do taxes, but they're not able to advise you on that tax position. And then you have the person that can advise you. So, Mike, when you and I talk about EAs, we talk about the EA being able to not only do the taxes, but advise, right?
Yeah, and Sean, I want to point out one more number on your slide, and it's if you look down about 4 or 5, it talks about enrolled agents, and it has number of about approximately 57,000 in the United States at this time, and that's an important number because what we've seen with the enrolled agent profession over the last decade is the graying of the profession. In other words, up until recently, there weren't as many young people coming into the enrolled agent profession. And so we have a lot of people that are getting a little bit older, starting to think about what they're going to do with their practice. Are they going to sell it? They're going to close it down. And so this presents another pathway, another opportunity for students coming in to go to work for one of these firms and then have the opportunity to perhaps buy it. And I can tell you from my own personal experience, I have a former student of mine who went to work for a tax firm here in San Diego, and the preparer is going to be retiring in the next year and a half, and she is going to be buying that firm. And this is a woman who didn't have a degree in accounting. She came to MiraCosta College. She went through our enrolled agent program. She passed the exam, as I said, started working for a firm, has done very well there. And now she has the opportunity to purchase that firm and run it on her own. And I think this is the kind of career path that a lot of our students are going to be looking for going forward.
And Mike, you brought up a great point there, your enrolled agent program. So let's talk about MiraCosta and the enrolled agent program, what that is, because that's the difference between what I think a lot of schools are offering and what you could be offering with a few more steps in the soup, correct?
Correct. I mean, Sean, we started out as most colleges do. We had an individual tax class. But then, back in 2004, when I first started getting attuned to what was going on with the enrolled agent and what a great pathway I thought for community college students, especially, I took the exam. And then I started with as I said, with the individual tax class, and then created a business entities class to parallel part 2 of the exam. And then recently, and Sean, you were a partner with me in this, we created the course that parallels part 3, representation and practice and procedures. So now at MiraCosta, we have all 3 courses that each parallel the 3 parts of the exam. And in addition to that, we've created a certificate around that, and we call that our income tax professional certificate that includes the individual class, the business entities class, and the representation and practice and procedures class.
Yeah, so your students, by taking each of these 3 classes, not only gets the fundamental training that they need in those specific areas, but they're simultaneously studying for that portion of the enrolled agent exam. So if someone keeps up with it, by the end of that time they finish your program, they will also have completed the enrolled agent exam and be certified, right?
That's true. And Sean, we tell people that, you can get through this program in a year to 18 months, and theoretically you could do it sooner. Maybe some students take it a little bit longer. But the way that we've structured the classes, the timing of the classes, they can get through it in a year to 18 months. And as you said, be fully certified by passing all parts of the exam and be ready for practice. Or if they're already practicing, being able to add this additional certification to their name. And I just want to say that, when I started out in 2004, being basically someone that was, trying to get awareness of the EA exam out to the community college community, it was kind of a tough sell. But what's happened in those intervening 15, 16 years is that a lot of people realize the potential. And what's additionally happened is firms are now hiring enrolled agents, and I'm talking about CPA firms. And Sean's going to talk about that a little bit later. But that has been a key marker, if you will, in the increased awareness of the certification.
Absolutely. This program that we have, we collectively call it the Pathway to EA program, which is utilizing McGraw Hill materials in your classroom, but then supplementing it if you feel appropriate with the Surgent EA review. So let's talk about this part 1 of this this pathway, Mike, which is the individual taxation. So you are one of the contributing authors for McGraw Hill's Fundamentals of Taxation. And I remember when you and I were talking about the program that we were looking to do at Surgent, which was match up with a textbook publisher. We were talking about, well, what this is what I'm looking for in a textbook. This is what Surgent's looking for. And one of the things that impressed me about the book that you all have is that it was not only teaching the aspects of how to physically do a tax return. So it doesn't matter, not like I'm teaching tax software, but I'm teaching you how to do the tax return, A, and then B, you're teaching it in a very linear manner, starting with interviewing the tax preparer, right? And then moving on to gathering the information and then doing the return and, what we're doing, the deductions and credits and all that. So let's talk a little bit about the book and the supplemental tools like Connect that is used with McGraw Hill for instructors to use with this book.
Sure. And so this is what we call a forms-based book, as opposed to a book that is basically focusing on theory. And not that we don't have theory with the book, but we're really talking about the practical application. We want people to be able to take this individual course and go out and either start working on an internship or a part-time basis for a firm or some other tax preparing entity. And also, as we talked about, being able to take the Enrolled Agent Exam Part 1 and be successful. And one of the ways that I think that success comes into play is that, as you can see from the slide, for all students that purchase Fundamentals of Taxation, they get access for 6 months to the review program that Surgent provides for Part 1 of the individual exam. And look, even if your students at this point are not even interested in the Enrolled Agent Exam, having access to that review, the Surgent review, is a great ancillary tool to help them be successful in the class. And so just don't think of it, well, that's only good for those students that are going to take the exam. No, it's good for all my students. I encourage all my students to use that function in terms of preparing for exams and other projects that we might have. So having access to that is just a great tool. And then in regards to the book itself, obviously, like many textbooks, we have true, false questions, multiple choice questions, but we also have tax return problems that are built into Connect. And that means that they're auto-graded. And what's great about that is that, when a student sends me a question, if we have a tax return project, they have a question, I can go in there and see exactly what they're doing on that return and give them almost instant feedback and very precise direction of what they need to look at. And what that's resulted in is that, and I'm just going to take my own experience as a college student, as an undergraduate, I had, one tax class, and it was kind of like an amalgam of everything. You were going to have individual taxation, trust and estates, business entities, and there were multiple tax projects that were in that class. And the professor never really spoke to the project. It was just like, you have a tax project, here's the information, complete the returns, pass it in. And you would start working on it and like, I have no idea what I'm doing. All right. So between the forms-based approach that we have with the book and the ancillary software that Connect has in terms of being able to do the built-in auto-graded returns, your job as the instructor becomes a pathway to be able to guide the students to not only understanding what's on it, but to get it correct. And that way, so that when they go out into the real world, they're going to have a high degree of confidence in preparing returns.
Exactly. And when individuals say to me, well, if I'm using the McGraw Hill, they're studying for the exam anyways, and the content is the same. And I give my Texas barbecue versus Carolina barbecue analogy. They look the same, but they're entirely different. The way they ask questions in the enrolled agent exam is a very unique approach compared to like how you would use questions to teach the concept of tax, right? So can you talk about a little bit about why the two work well together and how they're different?
Well, first I will say that, one thing about the enrolled agent exam, if you're not aware about it, it's all multiple choice. And that's a little bit different from the way I run my class because, when I have an exam or a quiz, there could be a combination of true, false, multiple choice, short answer. I like to use those because that really gets to help them understand the concept behind the number that they're going to put in the return. And so the exam is very different in that respect. It's all multiple choice. And much like the CPA exam in this regard, that the questions are created in a way to have that one word or that one phrase that's going to make that distinction between, do you just think you know it or do you really know it? All right. And so it's so easy to fall in that trap on the enrolled agent exam about, well, I understood the concept, but I missed something. And yeah, what you missed could have been that one word that was going to make that distinction between it being right or wrong. And the great
Yeah.
part about the Surgent review is that they're going to see a variety of questions that are going to drill them on that, so that by the time they get to the exam, they become very aware of where the trap door is. That's the way I like to refer to my student. Where's the trap door? And if you're not careful, you don't understand that one word or phrase hinges the way the question needs to be answered correctly, you're going to fall through the trap door. And the Surgent software does a great job of training you for that.
Yeah, I like to say, you teach them how to be a tax preparer, we teach them how to be a test taker. And the two don't necessarily travel in those on the same lanes. They're going kind of the same direction, but clearly different tracks. So you're going to be updating the textbook, and it's going to be ready for the January classes, which means that you're going to be utilizing 2021 tax law. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so they're going to be learning it just for the tax season that will be rolling upon all of us come February or so. So a good point is that you're using current content, and I can't stress that enough. To be able to take that undertaking and update a text when we're waiting till the last second for the IRS to provide updated forms and publications and everything else. That it really is a work of love to get it to where it's ready to go in January. So I know one of the things you've added is the enrolled agent fast facts. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and by the way, in addition to the enrolled agent fast facts, all the questions in the fundamentals of taxation that are relevant to the enrolled agent exam are tagged that way. So you'll see a multiple choice question, it'll have EA next to it. That means it's tagged as a subject content area that is tested on the enrolled agent exam. And when you're creating a quiz or a midterm exam through the test bank, you have that as an option to select questions that have that designation. Now, the new Fast Facts basically is going to be a quick fact about the enrolled agent exam that's going to be at the end of every chapter. So as the students go through the course, they're getting these, what I'll call very nice tidbits of information about what is the enrolled agent exam, what does the exam look like. And in addition to that, it's every time that they see one of these Fast Facts in the chapter, or at the end of the chapter rather, there's going to be a link for them to sign up for this the Surgent free review. And I think that's critically important because, sometimes at the beginning of the class, if we just have that notice in the front, they may not really have an interest, but you get them 3 or 4 chapters in and they're starting to really enjoy the class, and they're hearing you talk about the possible career opportunities that are there for an enrolled agent. And then the light kind of goes on. They go like, yeah, I'm interested. So one of the things that we wanted to do with the new edition of book is make it very easy for students at any point along the pathway of the semester to be able to click on and go, yes, I want to utilize that tool now. Whether or not I just want to use it to study for the class, which I said earlier is certainly legitimate, or I want to use it to help start preparing for that part 1 of the enrolled agent exam.
Very good. Let's talk about the autograded tax form. So you stress the fact that this is a form-based textbook, and I cannot stress how important that is, because you are teaching practical content on how to do the actual form. So give some examples of where they would do parts of forms or schedules with a full 1040. Kind of give a 30,000-foot view of what might happen for the student experience and the professors who are administering it.
Well, I mean, for both the student and professor, there are multiple opportunities to be able to access problems, tax problems that are auto-graded in Connect. We have them at the end of every chapter. We have an appendix that has another group of problems that are more advanced, if you will. And so there's multiple opportunities for students to engage with this material. And of course, depending upon where the professors feel their students are at any point in time, they can use these projects. So let me just give you an example of how I do it. Normally in every chapter that I teach out of the book, I'm going to have at least one of the auto-graded tax return problems as part of the assignment. And then I have 3 tax projects that I use during the semester that are going to go up in terms of degree of difficulty. And I pull those from the appendix. And so by the end of the semester, my students have not only learned the material through the quizzes and the midterms where they're getting the questions, the multiple choice, to true, false, and the short answer, but they have done a number of tax returns over the course of the semester such that their confidence level is pretty high. And one of the ways that we know that that's the case is that we have had a number of our students either volunteer in the VITA program, and for many of you may know already what that is, but that's the IRS program for volunteer income tax assistance, where our students go out and help, moderate to low income people do their tax returns. And then we also have a number of our people work for some of the proprietary tax preparation firms, such as Liberty Tax and Jackson Hewlett. We have a relationship with both of those in our particular area. And so a number of my students get that experience. And one of the things that these people have commented on is that your students don't seem to be afraid of tax returns, because we've given them a lot of practice on them prior to them going into these environments.
Very good. So let's take someone like me who has what I would call a relatively complicated tax return. So I mean, I'm dealing with a UBIT issue with rental properties, and we sold a company that has some future payouts on that. So something as complicated as my return that I shamefully paid $700 to get done because I wanted to be done right by an enrolled agent. Your course should have your students prepared to do that level of a tax return. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, very close to that, John, because I mean, one
Okay.
of the chapters in the book, we're going to deal with Schedule E, which is rental properties. In another chapter in the book, we deal with Schedule Cs, which are sole proprietorships. And then there is also a chapter in the book on partnerships and also a chapter in the book on business entities as well.
Very good. Very good. All right. So moving on here. So I went through why our company chose to go with McGraw Hill on this partnership, but I want us, Mike, to go through these 4 bullet points here that I put in, but I think what would be important here is for you to add flavor. And I can't stress this enough. You're not teaching them how to do tax software, even though you have Tax Act as part of your solution. You are fundamentally teaching them how to do a tax return. So it doesn't matter if they use Tax Act or TaxWise, TaxSlayer, or Drake. It doesn't matter. The students can understand when they put in line 14 of my 1040, they're going to understand what that means to me, the taxpayer, for everything downhill from that or downstream from line 14.
Yeah,
that to me is the pyramid, the top of the pyramid.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the concept of it's a form-based textbook. We're teaching from the forms and obviously teaching some of the concepts behind the forms, but we want them to understand how to do the return and why they're doing it. As you said, we don't want them to be data entry people. We want them to understand why this particular number is going on line 14 and the consequences of that number going on line 14 to other parts of the tax return. One of the things that I like to tell my students is that the 1040, I want you to think of that as really the summary page or pages of the tax return. And then as we go through the course, we're building up all that other material that is going to flow up to that front page or 2 of the 1040 and understand that sequence.
Yeah, and you kind of bring up a good point, Mike, because tax returns are not yes/no type of things. They're varying degrees of completion. I mean, I could be eligible for, let's say, American Opportunity Credit, as an example. But if that credit isn't put into my return, that doesn't get my return rejected. It just means my return isn't as perfect as it could be, right? So, as he giggles away there, ladies and gentlemen. So
well, it's like I tell my students, Sean, don't cost your clients money, right? And so if someone does leave that credit off your tax return, they're costing you money, right? So the thing we're always trying to preach is, we want to make sure that the return is right, that the tax payer is going to pay the the lowest amount that they're legally obligated to do on their return. And that's the way we want it to be. And so that comes with the understanding of, not only the concepts, but also the practical application of doing the returns that they have multiple chances to do within the Connect framework that goes along with the textbook.
Exactly. And Mike, you're a CPA, but you're also an enrolled agent. And one of the reasons why Surgent chose to partner with McGraw Hill was because you're an enrolled agent. We're going to talk more about the enrolled agent in a minute, but what benefits are you getting as an enrolled agent that you're not getting as a CPA?
Well, I mean, look, the truth is I became an enrolled agent because I felt if I was going to proselytize about this through my community college experience, that it's probably a good idea to have that designation. But in doing that, I mean, there are a lot of advantages to being an enrolled agent. And again, this goes back to why I think this is such a great pathway for community colleges. I get students that come into my program that already have degrees in other areas, but haven't been able to make the career headway that they were hoping to in the money associated with that. I get people that have no previous post high school education experience, and I get them in between. All right, and so I'm a CPA, and I'm very proud to be a CPA. I worked very hard to be a CPA, but the reality is this: the CPA pathway is a long one. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of money. All right, whereas the EA pathway is much shorter in duration, much less cost, and doesn't have some of the restrictions that go along with being a CPA. And let me just bring up that one key restriction that I always like to bring up to my students. I am licensed in California, right? If I want to practice in another state as a CPA, you apply for reciprocity, and you might get that. Most of the time you may, but there's probably going to be some things that are attached to that, like you got to do some other continuing education. So there's some roadblocks, if you will, in the way. When you are an enrolled agent, because that is a designation that is certified by the Treasury Department of the United States, you can practice anywhere in the country, in the United States territories, and you don't have to ask anyone's permission. If you decide tomorrow that you want to locate to Idaho, and you can hang out your shingle in Idaho. And I think that's critically important. And I will say, from my perspective, for my students in California, California being a very high cost state, many of my students realize that long term, I don't know if I want to start out here. It's going to be very difficult to buy a home here because of the high cost of living. This gives them more opportunity to get a professional credential. And then if they want to move to another state, they're good. They don't have to do anything else in terms of setting up a practice or joining a practice in that other area. And I think that's such a powerful tool for students that are going to be looking for, where's the best place to me to start my career and help me provide for my family.
Exactly. And Mike, this LA Times quote is from research you had done. So I won't go through the pain of reading it to everyone. It'll have the words sound like Oliver Twang. But the reality is, as you alluded to before, firms are looking under rocks right now to find enough qualified tax preparers. There are not enough in this country. To illustrate that point, right now the Global 7 firms have over 10,000 preparers in India doing tax work for the U.S. firms because there's not enough live bodies to do it here. Kathleen and I were at a conference with a community college system in Phoenix a few years ago, and one of the Global 7 firms was there because they were interested in this program because they were going to start setting up a tax prep office that was nothing but enrolled agents to do the bulk of the heavy lifting tax work for the firm throughout the country. And so Mike alluded to the graying population, if I can use that expression correctly. There are not enough new enrolled agents coming in to replace enrolled agents that are going to be retiring or selling their practice. And so that leads to job earnings. I mean, you see the stat we have here that in North Carolina, the lowest state in the country for enrolled agent earnings, it's $43,000 a year. And in New York, it's at $65,000 a year. And California is not too far off in New York with that number. And Mike, when you're talking about the CPA is 5 years of college plus work experience to get your CPA. But the EA is a year to 18 months, if not less, for that same person.
Yeah, and Sean, you know this well, being involved in exam review for a number of years, that what we're seeing with this next generation of students is that fifth year of education is becoming a barrier for them to consider going into the CPA profession. They look at it as extra time, an extra cost, and some of them don't feel they're in a position to do that right now. And I think, look, I think even the pandemic has added to that because of the uncertainty that a lot of people had around their existing jobs. And so, particularly in my environment, which is the community college environment, I have a lot of students that will come to me and go, look, I like numbers, but I'm looking to get into an on-ramp that can get me to some point of completion in 12 to 18 months where I can start a career. And then if I wanted to continue my education and pursue some other credentials in accounting, perhaps a CPA, perhaps a CMA, that's fine. But they're really looking like, I want something that's going to give me some tools that I can go out and start practicing those tools in order to build up a resume that is going to allow me to have a career. And that's why I think that, what we're talking about in terms of the program at my school, with the Cruise Fundamentals of Taxation book, with the partnership with Surgent, all designed to help you create a pathway for your students to be able to achieve that.
Exactly. And, Mike, you and I have had more than one conversation on this. The enrolled agent, what it offers and what you can do with it is just not as well known as we want it to be. We're probably talking to an audience that gets it. But I cannot tell you how many times I've been in IRS tax form. I've asked somebody, are you interested in becoming an enrolled agent? And they say either, what is an enrolled agent? Or I don't sell insurance products, or I don't have a college degree. So, this is content you put together that kind of explains what an enrolled agent is. But I want to talk about the representation, because when I use my medical personnel analogy, the receptionist, the medical assistant, the physician or the nurse practitioner, they're the enrolled person. They're the person that is qualified to do that. So can you talk about representation just real briefly for the small percentage that probably isn't sure what all an EA can do, which is on par with what a CPA can do with the IRS. So let's talk about that.
CPA and an attorney, and I think it's important to bring that out too. So you have the same representation rights before the IRS and other administrative bodies dealing with tax, and basically you are allowed to go in, and if a taxpayer has an issue, you'd be able to represent them. The only place where there's an exception to that is when you get into tax court. But when you talk about the lower level of tax court, you still are able to give input to your clients about what they can do. And so, yeah, I mean, a CPA, if there's some conflict resolution that has to go on with the tax return, they're going to represent the client before the IRS. Well, the enrolled agent can do the exact same thing. And I want to bring this back to another key point about the enrolled agent. When we talk about the CPA exam, there are a variety of topics that are tested on the CPA exam, including tax. But tax is not the main emphasis. There's a lot there on the CPA exam. I taught CPA review for many years, and we used to describe the exam as a mile wide and an inch deep, and I still think that's true. Whereas with the enrolled agent exam, all three parts of that exam are based on taxation. That's why, and Sean, I believe it's the National Association of Enrolled Agents that they call the enrolled agent the tax expert. And their reason for that, because they are totally trained in taxation, and not only in the preparing of it, but the consequences of that, and how do you handle those consequences, which is really part 3 of the enrolled agent exam. So I know CPAs that don't do tax returns. They're involved in audit, consulting, other aspects, but people assume that they are. Everyone assumes that every CPA is an expert in taxation, or at least has a high degree of competency in that area. That's not necessarily true, and it's not a dig. It's just that their focus is in another area. But an enrolled agent, that's it. It's tax. What you find is that many enrolled agents have such a high degree of skill set in tax that they basically know a lot more than a lot of CPAs do in relation to that.
Yes, yes. Interestingly enough, what a lot of tax preparers aren't aware of is how much they're allowed to represent their client with the IRS. And the Treasury has come forth with more strict rules on that your limitation is limited even more if you haven't done the annual filing season program. But if I'm, let's say if I'm just doing taxes on the side and I haven't really learned anything and I botch a return, let's say Kathleen, my apologies, I botched your tax return. There's only so much I can do to help you out. But if you go to Mike never touched the return that I did. But Mike, you can represent her on all aspects of that return and
That's
defend
true.
her and negotiate offers and compromise, the whole thing. And that's, I think, what we're talking about today is we want to get these future tax preparers not just to learn how to do taxes, but we want to give them the chance to be the most they can be in this industry, the best they can be in this industry, and the step involved to get from learning taxes through a course like yours and using the textbook you're authoring to become an enrolled agent. There's not too many additional steps, and it's a tiny fraction of what it is for like the CPA. So representation, can you talk about each one of these? Act on taxpayers' behalf, protecting rights. Talk about those a little bit.
Well, and honestly, I think the slide is somewhat self-explanatory, but, all of these things come with the enrolled agent certification. You're going to have a background in all of these things because of the test that you take. And then, of course, just like CPAs and attorneys, you have to do continuing education. And just like, with the CPAs and attorneys, the goal of that continuing education is to make sure that you're maintaining and upgrading your skill set as you go along in your career. And so all of these things are elements of that. And what makes you a good choice? I mean, a lot of people don't realize, going back to the example that Sean was just giving about Kathleen's tax return, that there may be people you go to do your return, but if there's a problem with that return, they can't represent you. All right.
Yeah.
And, and that in itself could be a little bit scary. Now, obviously, as Sean said, an enrolled agent like myself or a CPA could step in and then represent you. But wouldn't it be nice to know that the person that's doing your return, that if there's an issue, and it may not be anything wrong, it just may be an issue that comes up, can also represent you at the highest levels on that tax return? And really, that's what you're getting with all these elements that are outlined on this slide. That enrolled agent can not only do the return and do it right, but can also represent you if there's an issue that comes up, not only before the IRS, but other agencies related to taxation in the government.
Yeah, and I have 1,000 stories about this credential and the misunderstanding about it. But the reality is, Mike, someone can come into your program and not even know what a 1040 is. I mean, be that far out in the clouds, and in 18 months, not only be qualified to do individual and business returns, but also be an enrolled agent in an 18-month period for the amount of the review course and then your classes for that program. So it's a tiny fraction of the commitment of time and money and resources to become a CPA.
Yes, but
Plus, the
Sean,
path rate on the air much higher.
You hit an important word there. It's commitment. Even though you do not need a degree and you don't necessarily need any education to take the enrolled agent exam, you do need to have some facility with the subject matter. And that's why that, I recommend to my students is that you come in, you take our courses, to give you that foundation in the tax topics for each of those 3 areas. The Surgent Review is going to help you then take this knowledge base and prepare and successfully pass that exam so that you can be going out there and practicing with your certification. So, to say that you don't need a degree, that doesn't necessarily, I don't want you to think of that as devaluing the certification. It doesn't, you don't need a degree, but what you do need is a high degree of knowledge of all aspects of taxation, particularly as it relates to that particular exam. And so someone that wants to come in and say they want to be an enrolled agent, and they want to complete that program in 12 to 18 months, there's a high degree of time commitment to that. They're going to have to do the grunt work of getting through it. But many of my students are prepared to do that because when they look at the alternatives of the steps they would have to go through, the time, the expense that go along with it, they look at the enrolled agent and go, that seems like a pretty good deal. And in fact, it is a pretty good deal, given the cost and the time frame that we're talking about.
Mike, when we're not talking about Tom Brady, twice a year we talk about what is the wait list for your classes, because your program is incredibly popular in the San Diego area. You're in the North Counties, up just right close to Carlsbad, right?
That's correct.
So you're pulling in a local audience here, but I mean, you have students coming in from San Diego because your program is so popular. How many sections do you teach in your 145, which is your individual taxation, and how big is the class for that?
So we've gotten to the point, and of course, this program was built over time. So we run 2 sections of individual taxation every semester. We run 1 section of business entities every semester. And at this point in time, because we've just started it, we're running 1 section of what we call Accounting 147, ethics, representation, and responsibilities, every other semester. But, what's happening is we will gradually get to offering that every semester as well, because, the students from 145 individual feed 146 business entities. The combination of those 2 students feed Accounting 147, which is ethics, representation, and prepare responsibilities. And so,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So, I mean, we run this every semester.
And I know you said it took time to build this up, but it's extraordinarily popular now. I mean, getting into your 145 classes, it's kind of like finding tickets to a Harry Styles concert, right? I mean, and I know you have students walking here asking if there's a way to put you into the class. So how much does your school promote this program, or do you even need to?
Well, the school promotes it somewhat, though I am working with them to increase that, marketing of it, if you will. I promote it quite a bit. And so one of the things that I've done in building my program is establish relationships with the various tax preparer groups. In California, we have a group called the California Society of Tax Consultants. It's up and down the state with chapters. We have 2 chapters in San Diego. I have relationships with both of them. I have relationships with the local chapter of the National Association of Enrolled Agents. And also, as I mentioned earlier, a partnership with both Jackson Hewlett and Liberty Tax. And so them and other contacts, I promote this course every semester. I'm out there marketing to it. And one of the things that does is that I not only get students from the San Diego area, but as Sean was mentioning earlier, I get students from outside the San Diego area. Not only from Northern California, Central California, I get them from other states. I've had a couple of students take this in other countries, which is kind of weird because I get the email from them at 3 o'clock in the morning and they wonder why I'm not up, checking email at that point. So, when you have a program like this that can lead a pathway like this, I think what you're going to find is once you get that ball rolling, it starts to grow exponentially. And we're not a big college, by the way. When we talk about, offering 2 sections of Accounting 145 every semester and business entities every semester, we're a small college. We're not a large community college by any stretch of the imagination. We're about 9,000 FTES, and we're able to do that all the time. And so I think a big part about, growing a program is developing those relationships with the tax organizations because they really do help you grow the program.
Very good. And I mean, I know we're going to, Claire, I believe we're going to make this presentation available to everyone. And I want to be mindful of the fact that we want to turn around and do a Q&A here. So how about what we do is we open up to the Q&A, and I'm assuming, am I correct in assuming that we're going to send this out to everyone, Claire?
Yep, we'll be sending out the recording and the slides for everyone.
Okay. Now, so I'm not seeing the questions coming in. I've seen a little thing popping up at the top right corner. So At this point, do you have some questions for Mike?
As of right now, from my end, I don't have any questions that have come through. You guys must have absolutely nailed it. Kathleen, I don't know from your end if you have any questions.
You know, I haven't seen any questions come through either, but I don't know if we do want to, can we open people's microphones, Claire, if they do want to just ask questions out loud?
That is a great.
Yeah.
I
And
think
I will stop sharing.
and there was one question that came through just a minute ago and that asked if they can see what Surgent looks like.
Sure. It'd be kind of fast, but let me jump into something real quick here.
Okay. And I'm gonna unmute everyone. So just an FYI, we'll see.
You know, while Claire is doing that, Mike, just to kind of add on with what you're talking about with, you know, having some students out of the country or around the country join your course. When Claire and I are in contact with instructors from all over the country, you know, there's that need especially at community colleges, for the programs to really help shape a direct path to a career for students. And you mentioned that earlier, Mike, about, you know, this is direct application for students to jump into a career pretty quickly. And that's just an amazing opportunity for students to be able to do that without, like you were saying, 5 years of schooling, post undergrad, additional hours, you know, on accounting courses, et cetera, that, you know, it's a good career path that you can directly get students into through your course.
And I would also, you know, add to that, Kathleen, that you know, there's a lot of grant money out there right now for community colleges, and there will be more. You know, you have the Perkins 5 grant, and you know, different states have their own grant programs. And you know, when I started this program, one of the things I did is I applied for a grant, and I got some money to develop this curriculum. So, you know, and what, you know how grants work. They always want to go, okay, so you got the money, you said you did this, but what are the results? And obviously, in this case, I was able to show some very, you know, not only verifiable results in terms of numbers, but ones that really meant the objective of what we're trying to do. So if you're a community college instructor and you're thinking about, you know, well, I might apply for Perkins or some other grant that might be available to me in my particular state, thinking about developing the tax program, or if you already have some elements of it, enhancing the tax program is a great way to do that, is by getting one of these grants to get you some time to be able to build this program up. And let me just add to that, if there's anybody in the audience that, you know, wants to see a copy of my syllabus for my classes or wants to talk about how I set my stuff up, I'm happy to share that with you. I believe my email is on one of the slides. If not, it's just mdeschamps@miracosta.edu. I'm happy to share my materials with you.
Well, and that's a great segue. We actually had a question come through that if you could speak to how or if the Surgent study tools are used in class, or is it mainly used after class?
That's a great question.
Well, there's two answers to it.
There is. And so when we talk about the individual taxation class and with the business entities class, they're really used out of class. However, when we get into accounting 147, I basically use the Surgent materials as my basis for the presentation of that class.
Awesome, thank you. There was also a question that came through, I think about the program. So I'm guessing you offer 4 classes, 3 for EA subjects and 1 for preparing the exam.
No, actually, we offer three classes for each exam. And, you know, what we do is that with our partnership with Surgent is that we recommend that they use the Surgent materials for preparing for the exam. That said, the exception is accounting 147, which is, I think Sean has it on the screen right now, is that we use the Surgent materials in that. And I want to go back to a moment ago when I was talking about grant application. I actually am working on a grant right now to create a full-blown review program using the Surgent materials at my school. And the idea is through this program, through this grant, to be able to subsidize some of the cost of that for my students going forward. And so I do hope that that grant is approved. and I can start to do that going forward. I have the template already outlined. It's just a matter of giving me the money.
It's always the money, isn't it? So the students, when they let's say, like, get the free 6 months to part 1 of the exam, it's this course right here, and we break it down into the topics of the exam. And if you see from a linear standpoint, preliminary work taxpayer data, and then, you know, assessing what are the income and assets, and then you doing your deductions and your credits, including the itemized and the QBI, and then the credits, and then, you know, calculating the taxation, and then advising the taxpayer. I mean, it follows the path of Mike's class and his book. But the only addition to that is now there's a new Category 6 part 1, which is specialized returns for individuals. So a student on their own can just study these topics as they're getting the similar topics in the class, so they can, you know, when they're doing questions on preliminary work and tax returns, they can come in and ask a few questions out of that specific area and be able to get them. But then what Mike also does with his class is he can assign homework from Surgent questions. He can assign quizzes and tests and things like that. And so the student has a different dashboard when they're using it like that. And then that dashboard, the student sees what their assignments are for the week, and Mike can give them outside reading to look at, like if he wants to look at an article, you know, from Forbes on the proposed new tax law or something. He can assign that to the students through all this. But the heavy lifting, like for the 145 class for Mike, is using that fundamental taxation book and the McGraw Hill Connect that goes with it for the students. And then if he wanted to supplement it with the Surgeon, he could.
And let me just add, because the Surgent materials are focused, laser focused, if you will, on the enrolled agent exam, and the enrolled agent exam is all multiple choice, there are no forms, exercises that you're going to have them practice in the Surgent software. And so that's where the Connect software is so strong, because you actually have auto-graded tax return problems built into Connect that are going to give them those practice tools. Because, you know, again, it's one thing to understand the theory, but then what you want to make sure you're reinforcing that experience by having them do the actual returns.
Amen. And you know, we said earlier in the presentation, the fundamental taxation book is to teach you how to be a tax preparer. The Surgeon course is to teach you how to be a test taker. And those two, you know, have similar ingredients, but are very different in their approach and how they're taught and what they do. So if you want someone to become an enrolled agent, you have to first teach them how to be an enrolled agent, which is teach them how to do taxes, which is where the McGraw Hill curriculum comes into play.
Awesome. We had a couple other questions come in. Does Surgent integrate with LMS like Brightspace?
No. So it is its own LMS, but you can import student scoring data into, Mike, what are you using? You're using
Canvas.
what's your LMS?
Yeah,
Canvas.
we use Canvas, yeah.
You can import student scoring data into Canvas or other LMSs, and we'll work with you on how to do that.
Okay, great. And then there was another question that came through. Is there an OLC pre-designed course for this Text and Connect? And yes, there is. So we can definitely get that copied over to you. I'll drop my email in the chat if you want to just shoot me an email, and I can get that copied over to your Connect account. Any other questions? I thought I had turned everyone off mute, but it was very quiet for everyone being on mute. And so I don't think I can just blanket, like make everyone off unmute. So if you have any other questions, enter them in the chat or the Q&A. But I know we are actually almost right at time as well. So
let me just say, I really appreciate everyone taking time out of their day to listen to Sean and I preach about the enrolled agent exam.
Yes. Thank y'all so much
Yeah.
for joining us today. We definitely thank you, Mike and Sean, and also thank you to our participants. We really appreciate it. And if you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to me or Kathleen. We're happy to help. And just as a reminder, we'll send out the recording and a follow-up email. And Kathleen, Mike, Sean, anything else to add?
I don't think so. We'll be happy to get you in touch with your local McGraw Hill rep if you have further questions. And like we've been mentioning, the new edition of Fundamentals of Taxation is going to be hot off the presses in just about a month. So we'll be sure to get copies of those over to everybody who's on the call with us today.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Well, I hope everyone has a great rest of their week. Thank y'all.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
care.
Thank you.